Welcome back to our World History online lectures. Today we are covering an important topic that is called the Protestant Reformation, or the Reformation for short. Here are the questions you need to focus on for this video. The first is, what was the Reformation and why did it begin? And the second is, what effect did Martin Luther have on the Reformation? The Renaissance and its humanist ideas act like a catalyst or as the anchor for several other important historical movements in Europe during this time period. These include the Reformation, which we're talking about today, the Scientific Revolution, and the Age of Exploration. It's important to realize that all three of these events, along with the Renaissance, happened simultaneously, or at the same time. And this just exemplifies just how much change Europe was experiencing from the 1300s to the 1600s. Although all three of those events are happening at one time, we're only going to focus on the Reformation today. In 1517, Europe was uniformly Catholic, meaning that there was only one church to belong to, and that was the Catholic Church. However, by 1545, large sections of Europe are going to become Protestant, and this is due to the historical movement historians call the Reformation. During the medieval era, the Catholic Church existed as the sole source of ultimate power, knowledge, and wealth. They owned and controlled about 1/3 of all the land in Western Europe. Needless to say, they had a ton of power. It's important to understand that people living in the Middle Ages were very religious, and up until the Renaissance, the only reason for living was to please God in the hopes that you would get into heaven. Now, the only people who could tell you how to lead a good life and to get into heaven were the priests, as they were the only ones allowed to read and interpret the Bible. So as the Renaissance spread throughout Europe, the church was in increasing need of money to support the lavish lifestyles of the clergy and to beautify their own churches. This led to corruption, and unfortunately, the everyday Catholic people are going to be the targets of this corruption. Eventually, people will start to stand up to these corrupt practices of the church, and it will evolve into what we know today as the Reformation. The Reformation was a series of religious revolutions against the Catholic Church that started in the year 1517. Many people were becoming wary of the Catholic Church because they were engaging in unchristian and corrupt behavior. This behavior included the selling of indulgences and the church's desire to amass more wealth. In an effort to make the church more aware that people were unhappy with it, Martin Luther is going to write his 95 Theses and nail them to a church door in Wittenberg, Germany, which inadvertently starts the Reformation. Martin Luther was a devout Catholic. He was a monk who loved the church and God above all else in life. However, he couldn't stomach the hypocrisy of the church, and he was especially angry with the church for the selling of indulgences. Indulgences were documents people could purchase that would erase their sin in the eyes of the church. People were also told that these documents would reserve you a spot in heaven. Essentially, they were get-out-of-hell-free cards. Martin Luther had a major problem with this because, one, he didn't believe the Pope had the power or right to grant indulgences to people. Only God could do that. And two, the selling of indulgences unfairly benefited the rich. The rich could afford these, no problem. However, the lower classes would sometimes spend their entire income on the purchase of a single indulgence. Luther saw this as a major abuse of religious power. How could the church sit by and advocate the selling of these documents at ridiculous prices when some families could barely feed or clothe their own children? He decided that the church needed to be called out on their actions, and in 1517 he wrote his famous 95 Theses, in which he wrote out 95 objections to the practices of the Catholic Church. Now, at this point in time, he had no clear intention of starting one of the largest religious revolutions in history. Instead, he just wanted the church to stop making money on the business of salvation. The church saw Luther's actions as means for excommunication. Excommunication was very serious amongst Catholics because they believed the only way to get to heaven was with the blessing and the sacraments of the Roman Catholic Church. So now that Luther was no longer a member of the Catholic Church, he was condemned to hell. However, Luther himself did not see this as that big of a deal because he didn't believe the Pope had this power, and he actually burned the letter the Pope sent him notifying of a status change within the church. Luther was further condemned for his actions by the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, who set out to arrest him unless Luther would recant or take back his actions against the Catholic Church. Of course, Luther refused. Thankfully, Luther was not arrested and instead was taken in and hidden by his allies, the German princes in the region, who also helped spread his ideas throughout Central and Western Europe. So let's take a look at how Luther's ideas differed from the established Catholic practices. One of the most important things Luther did was translate the Bible from Latin to German. He believed that everyone should be able to read and interpret the Bible for themselves, to build and grow their own personal relationship with God. He didn't believe there was any need for this relationship to be monitored by a priest. Furthermore, he removed some of the sacraments and rituals from church services. He believed in the power of a sermon and that people could benefit from these, but he didn't believe that rituals such as confirmation, communion, and repentance could erase any sin. Eventually, these ideas formed into an established religion of Lutheranism. An individual who ascribes to Lutheranism is a Lutheran. And Lutherans are Christians, it's just a different denomination or sect within Christianity as they worship and have different beliefs about how salvation can be reached. Lutheranism is a form of Protestantism, which is a larger label for anyone who protested against the Catholic Church during the Reformation. Let's take a look at a diagram to make this a bit more clear. Here's our umbrella of Christianity in Western Europe. At first, there was only one form of Christianity, and that was Catholicism, or the Roman Catholic Church. However, after the Reformation, many new forms of Protestantism emerged, such as Lutheranism, Anglicanism, Calvinism, Presbyterian, Baptist, etc., etc. In the next video, we'll talk more about the spread of Protestantism throughout Europe. But for right now, that's all I have, so make sure to take the quiz, link is down below, and I'll see you tomorrow in class.